spoke to you last about GMOs and food production. Lemon fall from the tree. I picked it up, and what I now hold in my hand is that lemon. Norman Borlaug, the father of the Green Revolution, said, "People just do not understand the complexities of food production." Have you ever placed a seed in the ground, watered it, nurtured it, weeded it, and whether it be potatoes or tomatoes, GMO or organic, and when you harvest what you have planted, then you have to sit back and behold the miracle of what you have just seen. The miracle of growing food, the food that we all need to sustain our lives. 6 months before, this was just a tiny, tiny white flower. Some societies succeeded because they managed to grow enough food, but others failed because they did not. And that is part of what we are to discuss today. Also, after I spoke the last time, a man came up to me and he said, "Arnt, I learned something today." I'm glad that he did. And that reminded me of my good friend, Socrates. Socrates was a man I met after reading Plato's The Republic. Socrates was indicted by the Senate for being a heretic, and in his last speech to the Senate in 399 BC said these words, "The hour of departure has arrived. We go our separate ways. I to die, you to live. Which is best, only God knows." That evening, while sitting in his jail cell, a young man came by playing a lyre, singing a song. Socrates said, "Young man, come here, come here. Teach me that song." The young man said, "What for? You are to be executed and die tomorrow morning." Socrates replied, Yes, I know all that. But before I die, I would like to learn one more thing. Before I die, I would like to learn one more thing." Very sweet words. Today you shall learn one more thing. What I hold in my hand is a safety pin. And some weeks ago, I looked upon this safety pin, something that we all have, something that we've all seen, something that we've all used. And I said, where does this safety pin come from? It comes from the hands and the mind of a man named Walter Hunt, a brick mason, mechanic, and a tinkerer who owed a man $40 and did not know how he was to pay him. He did not have the money. While he was thinking about how to pay the man the $40, he was sitting in his shop and he was bending a piece of wire. And then he made a clasp. He took that and received a patent number 6281 on April 10th, 1849. He sold the patent to the man he owed the $40 to for $400. And that man sold it to the W.R. Grace Company, who then made these millions and millions of safety pins. Collapse. How societies choose to fail or succeed. Some years ago, I spent a week in the Olympic National Forest, and while there, I met a man, Professor Hugh Wilcox. Hugh had a PhD from UCal Berkeley in physics. He got a job at the Livermore Laboratory working on the Manhattan Project. His wife, who also had a PhD in physics, could not get a job at the lab. She was told, "We do not hire women physicists." She got a job as a secretary. Professor Wilcox later got a PhD in biology and plant physiology. And I asked Hugh one day, what are 2 or 3 of the biggest problems facing mankind over the next 50 to 100 years? And he said, Arnt, population is number 1, education is number 2, and our environment is number 3. And the more I travel throughout the world and see the disparity between the have and the have-nots, it all comes back to number 1, number 2, and number 3. I remember that conversation very well, and perhaps I filed it away in medulla oblongata for years, until my son Chris gave me this book, Collapse, by Professor Jared Diamond at UCLA Los Angeles. In reading it, I also wanted to be back in the forest with Professor Diamond and Professor Wilcox while they talked and I just sat on the log and listened to 2 great minds. Jared Diamond looks back at past societies and the decisions that they made, some that succeeded and others failed, and why that happened. The Anasazi, a society that lived in New Mexico for 1,000 years and then disappeared. The word Anasazi in Navajo means the ancient ones. The lack of water, deforestation, and food brought about their demise. The Maya, a great civilization who lived right here in Mexico. Chichen Itza, Palenque, and Tikal, they built them all. And then moved on, abandoning it all to the jungle. We know very little about them, and one reason is, in 1560, the Catholic bishop Diego de Landa, in his efforts to eliminate paganism in Mexico and Guatemala, had all Maya manuscripts burned in one of history's worst acts of cultural vandalism. Only 4 manuscripts survive. The end of the Maya, was it the lack of water, hence no food, civil war and strife, or was it something else? We do not know. Or was it a man who looked up at all those rocks and those pyramids who said, I ain't hauling any more rocks? Easter Island, so named because when found by the Spanish, it was on Easter. It is the most remote habitable scrap of land in the world. It is 2,300 miles from Chile, and it is 1,300 miles from Pitcairn Island. The natives over the years carved 397 stone statues, but they also cut down every tree on the island. When you do that, you have no trees, you have no more canoes, you have no more canoes, you can't go and fish, you can't eat. The Spanish, of course, gave them smallpox. And maybe at one time there were 5,000 people on the island, but in 1872 only 111 were left. This was a society that destroyed itself by over-exploiting its own resources. This, we can see, was the problem with many other ancient societies as well as current ones. Rwanda and Burundi in Africa are good examples of that. A lot of people and very little land, and a lot of tribal hate and distrust. 20 years ago, 1 million Hutsis and Tutsis hacked themselves to death. And today, some Rwandans still believe that war is necessary to wipe out an excess of population and to bring numbers in line with available land and food resources. Haiti, that way. Overpopulation, a high birth rate, deforestation, overfishing, illiteracy, corruption, a little rain, the practice of voodoo, dictators like Papa Doc and Baby Doc Duvalier are all reasons for Haiti's problems. Haiti only survives. It only survives on world welfare. And every expert that has ever gone to Haiti comes back and says it is not fixable. I will now skip over a lot of things so that we can get to Australia, who seems to have done everything wrong. Australia is the only country in the world that is also a continent. The British settlers, longing for the old sod, said, "Well, old boy, let's have a fox hunt." Big mistake. Foxes will eat your chickens. Then they said, "Well, how about rabbit stew?" Good idea, old boy. Let's get some from Spain. And they did. A bigger mistake. 150 million rabbits later, poison, dynamite, and thousands of miles of fences, and nothing worked until a virus was brought from Madagascar that killed all the rabbits. Don't fool with Mother Nature. Don't bring in non-indigenous species. Florida now has 10,000 Burmese pythons and anaconda snakes. I suppose because somebody thought they were cute and U.S. Customs allowed them in. I did not know until last night when I watched a program on National Geographic that in 1940 someone brought the beaver in to Patagonia. and there is now a major war to eliminate the beaver in Patagonia, who is destroying that environment. It is absolutely unbelievable to watch. In 1930, Australia dammed the Murray and Darling rivers to irrigate the land. Another mistake, because the soils are mostly bad in Australia, and irrigation over the years brings up the salts, and it will take 500 years to flush it out. Chemicals and dams reduce the flow of the rivers to the ocean to nothing, resulting in no nutrients coming to the Southern Ocean, and the fish starved. Many fish species have now been lost forever. The good news is that the dams are slowly being removed. We, of course, have done the same thing by damming the Colorado River, but we will not remove Hoover Dam. We overfish. Fish stocks could be maintained if managed properly, but not when Japan pays $80,000, or is it $800,000 for one bluefin tuna. And China only wants the fin of a shark to make soup. The Atlantic tuna is gone, and the Grand Banks are empty of Atlantic cod. The oceans are huge, and illegal fishing is rampant. Australia logs a few species of trees, grinds them up for pellets, and sells them to Japan at $6 a ton. Japan makes paper out of the pellets, and sells that back to Australia for $1,000 a ton. The Green Party in Tasmania, the island south of the mainland, got a ban to stop logging the 300-foot trees in national parks. A year later, the logging companies were back, after making large political contributions to the Conservative Party in power. This proves that money talks and shit walks. While this sounds as if everything is bad, it is not, and Australia is now addressing many of their problems. But too many other countries are not, or don't believe that the problems are bad, or do not have the money or resources to deal with those problems. Corruption and bribes are the main reasons for illegal logging of the exotic species of trees in Malaysia and Africa. There might be 10 more years left. After reading the book Collapse, I sat back for the longest time and just looked at it. While I gathered my thoughts, and I concluded that what happened to the Maya and Easter Island had no relevance for me as to how I saw the problems of today. Pollution, waste, and global warming was not an issue 500 or 1,000 years ago, but they all are today. August 6th, 1945. I have picked August 6, 1945 as the date of change. On August 6, we dropped the atomic bomb, and World War II was over. And everything we have and use and see today comes after that date. The jet airplane, a trip to the moon, full body scans by TSA when you fly, your cell phone, television, Netflix, heart operations, plastic bags, pollution, explosion, pollution, and global warming. The latest studies have now confirmed that global warming is man-made. If the temperature rises in the Arctic, the tundra will melt and release billions of gallons of methane gas in the air. Boeing Airplane Company and Airbus say that air travel will double in 20 years. The result is 10,000 more airplanes with exhaust at 38,000 feet. We consume, and that results in garbage. India and China find it impossible to deal with. 14 billion plastic bags end up in garbage dumps in Mexico. Seattle ships their garbage by train to be buried in a canyon in eastern Oregon. Staten Island, New York has a mountain of garbage from New York City 900 feet tall. It is so tall that it requires red warning lights to be placed on top of the garbage to warn and alert the planes landing at Newark Airport. Plastic thrown into the Great Lakes is plugging up the pumps, taking drinking water from the lakes. And where is the repository for spent fuel rods and radioactive material? In 1804, we had 1 billion people on this earth. In 1927, it was 2 billion. It took 123 years to go from 1 to 2. But now we add 1 billion every 10 to 12 years. And soon it will be 1 billion a year. Bangladesh is the most densely populated country in the world, and this year finally has approved birth control. But Pakistan, with one of the highest birth rates, has not or will not due to cultural or religious reasons. While food production has kept up with population growth, the world will require 50% more energy and water by 2030. Lake Baikal in Siberia holds 25% of the world's fresh water. How do you get that to Las Vegas?
By plane.
The UN estimates that the world will have to produce 70% more food by 2050 to feed an extra 2 to 3 billion more people. How do you do that when we are destroying farmland and natural habitat at an alarming rate? Catholic women worldwide are controlled as to birth control by 60 old men in Rome, and the Muslim women by old and ignorant mullahs. The way that religion and old cultures control women is a moral obscenity. No child born today should have to grow up in misery, to grow up and lead a miserable life. For the black and brown child, those odds are 50-50. The mineral industry has a miserable record. And now comes Mongolia, where iron ore has been found among other minerals. But how to mine it and get it to the markets? By rail. There's only one problem. Mongolia does not have a railroad. What do? We build one. No, let's build two. One going east, one going west. The life of the Mongolian sheep and goat herder will never be the same. The end of another era. Oil and gas are now everywhere. A new hole is punched into the earth every hour. In Mexico, 40% of the national budget comes from Pemex profits. In 1862, in Titusville, Pennsylvania, where the first well went in, the world only wanted kerosene for cooking and kerosene lamps. Enter John D. Rockefeller. In refining oil, the byproduct is gasoline. What to do with it? Pour it down the rivers and creeks of Pennsylvania until the world needs diesel and cars. And they did. I want to tell you a story. Mobile Oil Company, Libya, Arm & Hammer, and Occidental Petroleum. In the 60s and 70s, Mobile Oil went to Libya and gave 100,000 gold coins to the king and said, "Can we go poke around looking for oil?" He said, "Be my guest." They set up their camp. And for 4 years, they went 20, 50, 100, 200 miles out into the Libyan desert, poking and poking and poking, and never did find oil. They packed up their tents and went back home. A few months later, Arm & Hammer says, "I'll give you 100,000 gold coins if I can go poking around looking for oil." He says, "Be my guest." Within a year, Occidental Petroleum Company drilled a hole into the ground 4,000 feet down and found the biggest oil well, the biggest oil field in the oil business known as an elephant in Libya. Where they drilled the hole was exactly where Mobile Oil Company had their cook shack. So for 4 years, Mobile Oil had breakfast, lunch, and dinner right over the biggest oil field in Libya. The bad decisions and the bad consequences are always borne by the next generation. But that generation cannot vote or complain today. The Garden of Eden. Old tales and stories tell us that the Garden of Eden is somewhere between two rivers in Iraq. That is not true. The Garden of Eden is this little blue ball that we call Earth. This tiny planet that slowly moves throughout this huge universe, day after day, night after night. The sweet beauty of a sunset and the absolute magnificence of a sunrise. Why are we so bent on destroying it? Who will shoot the last elephant? Who will kill the last snow leopard? Was Professor Wilcox correct when he said, population, education, the environment, and the disparity between the have and the have-nots? Our history, the history of mankind upon this earth, is not filled with kindness. Mankind never has had real peace. Just occasional downtime to sharpen our swords for the next battle. Is our next battle one for the survival of the earth? All the old and ancient societies are gone, and we are the only one left. We are it. There is no one left but us. And as Al Cap in his comic strip years ago said, we have met the enemy, and the enemy is us. Do I think that we're going to fall off the cliff tomorrow? No, I don't. But we are getting closer. While we now have 8 billion people on Earth, can the Earth support 2 and 5 or 10 billion more? We all know what our problems are. We cannot do what Easter Island did by destroying ourselves, by over-exploiting our own resources, but to just say that population is our biggest enemy seems to be too easy. Maybe we can manage population. We can manage fisheries. We can manage deforestation. And we can stop throwing plastic bottles into the Great Lakes and the Pacific Ocean. But clean air and clean water and global warming, the solution to that escapes me. Someone said to me that nature will eventually solve it all. I do not think that that is true. We have created this mess, and we need to solve it. Einstein said that the problems that we have created cannot be solved at the level that created them. But I firmly believe that we are smart enough to do so. Maybe not today, or our generation, but the next generation, our grandkids, will have no choice. I only hope that it is not too late. I would like to close with a quote from Omar Khayyam, the Rubaiyat. Up from Earth's center, through the seventh gate I rose, and on the throne of Saturn sat, and many a knot unraveled by the road, but not the master knot of human fate. I thank you for listening. Yours.
Thank you. Oh, no. It's yours too. Thank you very much. There's a lot of stimulating questions in the minds of people here, and we will...
What to do with the lemon?
If you have a question or comments, please raise your hand, and Jim will bring you the microphone stand and give us your idea. Well, I can.
I answered all the
Here they
questions.
are. Don't be shy.
There are no more.
What's your opinion on the limitation of resources in the earth? Oil, minerals, whatever. We must be running out somewhere.
I don't think that you're going to run out. With the way that we are going about, you know, Europe doesn't have any of what you would call oil or, and Europe goes in, they sort of march to a different tune in many ways, and I'm not sure that I have the answer for Europe. I know that there's a great movement on to think that the wind will solve a lot of Europe's problems and eliminate. I know that there's a big move on to eliminate all of the coal burning plants that they have, especially in Eastern Europe. But when you look at a situation like France that has absolutely no dams any place in the country, and I'm not sure how many atomic generating plants they have. I think there's 10 or 20 of them. And they've never, ever had a problem, you know, as far as what they do there. But as long as people are going to drive, as long as we don't have an alternative for the car, we're always going to be looking for natural gas, and we're always going to be looking for oil. Unfortunately, in many ways, Europe is again at the mercy of the Far East, where 90% of their oil comes from.
Over here.
This has given us all a lot to think about, and then of course we ask ourselves, what can we do about this? We're not really at this active point in our lives that we were at one time. So should we all buy Diamond's book and send it to our kids and tie them in a chair and make them read it? I'm not in favor of action groups. If other people are, that's fine, but it's not my thing. And maybe it is our fate to go down the tubes. And then I wonder who's coming up next.
Well, you make an interesting point. You know, and it is so hard when you have 200 countries, 200 separate countries, or 300, however many there are. They seem to change every day. And everyone seems to have their own agenda. You know, what are we, 100, 200 people here this morning? How easy or how difficult would it be to get 100% consensus from all of you? I don't know whether it's any different, you know, in the world. But until a situation is absolutely forced upon you, you're not going to change. You're not going to change. It's too easy. It's too easy not to do anything about it until something happens that says, hey guys, you're going to have to deal with it. Many times, how many times do you see or know someone who has a little leak in their roof, but don't do anything about it until my bed's wet? There you are. I don't know what the answer to your question is, and I'm not so sure that any of us really do long range-wise. We can point out certain problems in the world, but until you get somebody somewhere that says, we got to do something about it.
What have I been doing to keep from being depressed about it? Because yeah, there's some really bad news out there. What I do is I watch for the sprouts. I watch for the little green sprouts of new ideas and the little experiments that are going on. And I've been finding a lot of hope that way. And the internet's full of them. And when they have little human experiments you do, I try them. You know, I see how that works. I mean, part of why we live here now is we started really seeing the idea of a walkable village makes sense. So you don't have to drive a car all the time. But we moved. We took action. Sometimes it's something as simple as going online and seeing a college is starting an urban farming project. And you give $100 to that, you know. This one little urban farming project in Bard College is doing fantastic. They're learning all kinds of things. So I see the next generation as doing a lot of very active projects right now that we can encourage the new ideas. For instance, my niece's college, they were complaining about the food. Well, this generation doesn't just protest and go to the administration. This group decided we want organic food in our kitchens, so they created a farm. And they're learning tons from the local farmers and things like that. So I think that maybe we're not at the forefront of the movement now, but we can watch, we can pay attention, we can see the little sprouts that need a little watering, and we can encourage the dialogue of the new ideas. For instance, Sweden is using trash as part of their fuel solution. They've run out of their own trash and they're having to import trash now. I mean, that's fantastic. There's little kids that are doing science experiments. A kid just created an idea about this little device he created that can go to the trash islands in the ocean, crunch it up, turn it into fuel, and then it becomes something good. So our generation may not have the solutions, but we can pay attention to the new sprouts of the new ideas and encourage them.
I absolutely agree with what you say. And 40 or 50 years ago, being an environmentalist, you were a kook. You know, you were tree huggers and trying to save this and trying to save that. Now, I think we all are at that point where we are all tree huggers and we are all, in our own way, environmentalists. You have to be. You will literally have to be.
Thank you. With regard to energy in Europe, Germany has had for a long time a lot of use of solar panels. They have them all over the place. It's been very supported by the government to subsidize everybody who gets that. They can put energy into the overall grid, and they have reduced their need for other sources of energy a great deal. And we could do more of that. With regard to nuclear energy, the nuclear plants, I hear people call that clean energy, and I always wonder, yes, but what happens to the waste product? Where do they put that? They wanted to once dump it on the family farm where I grew up in Nebraska until they found out about it. The government in Nebraska had made a deal with these people, and when the people in the farmers found out about this and didn't want it on their property and revolted against it, the state government had to back out. But they are still paying taxes to pay for the company that they wrote the contract with.
There's no question about the fact that the world needs a nuclear repository. And how this thing can end up being an argument for year after year after year after year. No, no, yes, no, yes. Everybody sues everybody else trying to figure out where the hell to place it. In regards to what you talk about Germany on the solar panels, the use of solar panels in Germany was almost non-existent, or 1 or 2% was being used until the government says you can take a tax deduction over something, because the payback at the cost of the payback to power to whatever you have would take like 20 years to pay it back, and that was too much for most people to handle. I think in some ways, once the world gets to the point where there are a few things that we can do, and maybe solar is not the answer for everything or everybody. As an example, wind power. If you go to Palm Springs and you look up over on that one side where all the wind seems to come, if you live near it, it will drive you up a wall. This humongous machine just goes boom, 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 and and it never, ever stops. I don't know how you make it silent. I mean, the turbine itself, the General Electric, is very silent, but it's the power of these tremendously, what are they, 50 feet long? Just go whoomp, whoomp. I mean, I just don't want to live next to a wind-powered farm, period. I just don't want to. I'm sorry, I'll live someplace else.
Just one comment, you talking about solar. Our next presentation is going to be about solar,
Right.
and it's turned out because of our speaker, Don Aitken, that probably this area is the most advanced in solar energy in all of Mexico. So please attend next week if you can. Dave?
I've heard that.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And in all due respect, you're singing to the choir. And we all know the problems very well, that the world's in trouble. But I would suggest this lady that spoke back here volunteer to come and speak at Open Circle, because there are lots of alternative ways that are happening that are underneath awareness, because we all know that you go where you look, right? And if we look at the fear, we're going to find it. We're going to find the destruction of the earth. What we need is more focus and more consciousness on this, so that we're not as depressed by the horrors that we face. That wasn't really a question, as much as a comment and a suggestion, Jim, that we have her come and speak to us.
Good idea.
We have one more question here that I see.
Hello? Yeah. Yeah, I have a question. You were talking about animals that are becoming extinct. And I saw a picture on TV just the other day of a dead African rhinoceros with the horn cut off, you know. And I've been curious about something for a number of years now. My understanding of why the rhinoceros horn is in demand is maybe a little unusual, but this is based on my understanding, with things like Viagra and Cialis available now, I can't understand why it would be in demand from my understanding. Do you have any idea?
Well, you know, I am just like you. I get a little perplexed. Why a man in China, 80 years old, would think that he can have an erection by taking the horn of a rhinoceros. I mean,
Maybe it goes to the second part of the
you know, there are
that's
things
education.
Well, there are things in life. When you see a certain comment, you say, I think I've heard it all, but you know, you never have. There is always something else. I agree with exactly what you say. But not only that, the ivory or the demand for ivory or a knife or a carving or whatever, what are they paying? $80,000, $100,000 a ton for ivory? I don't know how you get to stop people unless you get somebody like the people who seem to think that a hand-carved knife, when I go on a parade, is more valuable than the horn of an elephant or a rhinoceros. It's bizarre. But all of that only comes down to that word that Professor Wilcox said, education. And you will never solve anything, I don't think, in this world until you educate people. What can you say?
Another little comment for local grassroots programs. two ladies principally that I know of. Her name is Lawana and Barbara Shermer. A lot of you know her or know them. They've started a program on the moringa tree. And they've done a presentation in Santa Cruz del Alto, and it's going very well. One of the farmers has taken an acre of his land, and he's planted like 1,200 moringa trees, and he's starting to get his first harvest and starting to market it. I live on the south side, Roy and I live on the south side, and I'm starting the same thing. San Cristobal Zapotitan is a very poor town, and I've done a demonstration, and I've grown some little trees, and I've passed them out, and I've passed seeds out, and I'm starting a program in that village, and I'm educating the people on the benefits of the moringa tree as a food, survival food. It's got all the vitamins that you need. It's antiviral, anti-cancer, antifungal, a lot of preventative benefits to the plant. So it's a survival food. And those little programs that we can help start in neighboring towns will be very helpful to the people. Not to mention, of course, the aquaculture program in Mezcala. That's another one. Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks very much. I think that'll conclude our questions, and we're very grateful for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, dear.
Now, I'd like to talk to you seriously about next week's presentation because we're very privileged to have someone as distinguished as Don Aitken be an advisor to world governments, really, about energy conservation. And he's going to speak with us next week, but he wants to give a slide presentation, which he can't do here. So we're going to have it at Club Exotica, which is behind El Jardín in the plaza. And I assume you might know where that is, or ask the person sitting next to you. Somebody close by can advise you if you don't know. So he's going to give his slide talk on the 8th annual update on global warming, climate change, the transition of Mexico to renewable energy, and the Ajijic solar update. And let's see. He's going to focus this year on how entire nations can convert to 100% renewable energy.